you saw in the video inside, the Titan II was an integral part of the whole idea of peace return. That meant you need to be ready to go at a moment's notice should we ever come under attack to enact mutually assured destruction. And they did this by having 24-hour shifts down the silos at all times. They would call these shifts alerts, and they'd begin these alerts from that gate there. At that gate, they would be the first of a series of 4 phone calls. This first phone call to let the current alert know the next shift is here to get the gate open. Once the gate was open, they would have 3 minutes to make it from that gate to this access portal for themselves and any equipment they might need for their alert. If they did not make it within those 3 minutes, the security police would be called. The security police would show up in a vehicle like that one behind me there, and they would deal with the situation. Now they did this so that there was something wrong, so they had been infiltrated or something else. They wouldn't need to worry about a special code word to say at the phone. All they would need to do is slow down, not make it within 3 minutes. Security police are called, they show up, and they deal with the situation. Now the second phone call is made to follow this first flight of stairs. This phone call is confirmed they have indeed made it within those 3 minutes. Once that phone call is made, the commander would go into the door to the next area. This next area is called the entrapment area. Inside the entrapment area is the only camera that would have been in the entire site. Now earlier in the day at the base, the commander would have been given a code on a piece of paper. This code would then be read off from the third phone call made from within the entrapment area. Once this phone call was made, the commander would then burn the piece of paper, so assuming the code is correct, and put it into the red coffee can, which you'll see hanging in the entrapment area. Once this is done, the door to the entrapment area would become unlocked, and they can proceed down to the bottom of the access portal for their fourth and final phone call. We're now going to head down to the bottom of the access portal, so if you'll come this way.
With all the lines, it looks like a giant Zen garden.
Oh yeah, that's the copper mine. Oh, you mean the lines here?
Yeah, and the gravel.
You're talking about the up there. I'm like, oh yeah, the gravel, yeah, that. Yeah, that's the rake to help with the weeds.
I was expecting much worse stairs.
And then like earthquake or tornado, or if there was a near-miss nuclear strike, which is just outside of a mile away, everything out there would be gone. Everything past the blast block area is the hardened part of the site. It's designed to survive a natural disaster or a near-miss nuclear strike, and it lands just outside of a mile. And it does this through a combination of things. One of those things are these doors here. So my volunteer would mind putting over here, grabbing hold of the handle there with both hands, bring this thing back. As far as it goes. Not like you said, that's a heavy door, isn't it? If you had to guess, how heavy do you think that door was?
Like a foot thick, maybe 900,000 pounds.
A good guess, but not quite. It's actually 6,000 pounds, or 3 tons. Each of these doors is made out of steel I-beams. You can see where they're rolled together. Each of them have a built surface mount. When they are closed, you find an airtight seal. Typical fumes or radiation should be an attack or an accident on top side. Now looking around in here, you'll notice that some of the equipment is on shocks, and their electrical looks a little bumpy. Anything that was mission critical would have been on shocks or had direct electric. In fact, you notice that some of the lights on are ready to launch the missile. Those doors being closed to protect the crew. Now we're going to head into the control center now. We're going to learn more about the crew, and we may even launch a missile of our own. So you follow me, watch your step, watch your head. This time. Well, I got you and you. I saw raise their hands first. So, this is here, one there. All right, you two are going to help me with something a little bit, okay? But until then, like I said, we are in the control center now. If you look around us, you should be able to see some fairly large springs. You can see one there, another there, fairly easily. There are 8 of them in total around this room. If you look, you may be able to see the others. And the purpose of these springs is very similar to the purpose of the shocks and springs on the blast block area. And that is to keep this building and this room we're in seismically stable. Some of you may have noticed when we came in here, the floors are not actually connected to the walls around us. That is because we were actually suspended from the central pillar here. So as a result, if there ever was an earthquake or a near-miss nuclear strike in just outside of a mile, or we were to ever launch the missile out there, you'd barely be able to feel it. And since the doors are always supposed to be closed and they're airtight, if we ever were to launch the missile, you'd barely be able to hear it as well. Now, just like we've made our way down here, so is the crew. They've made their 4 phone calls, they switched off with the previous alert. What they're now going to do is they're going to do an inspection of this entire site, from top to bottom. Every bolt, every screw, every gauge, every door, everything. Remember, we are a retaliatory site, so we need to be ready to go at a moment's notice. Should we ever come under attack to enact mutually assured disruption. In order for everything to function properly, they do an inspection. This first inspection lasts 3 hours. Then, 12 hours later, they turn around and they do it again. So 6 out of every 24 hours spent down here is spent just inspecting this place, make sure everything's functioning properly. Now, most of the rest of the time they're down here, just going to inspect this room we're currently in. They're going to be filling reports out, so they had found something wrong in the inspection. They have to call a maintenance crew, get a maintenance crew down here to fix it. They're also going to be receiving and decoding dozens and dozens of messages throughout there from one of these black boxes here, and monitoring the missile. After all, liquid fuel is not very stable. You have to keep an eye on it to make sure everything stays as it should. Now, when we came in here, some of you may have seen a sign on the side of that console there. It says no loan zone, or 2-man policy. And what that sign means is pretty much what it sounds like it means. And as if you're in that zone, you cannot be alone. You have to be with one other person at all times. was a no-alone zone. So it's really only one exception. That's the level above us. There are 3 levels to this building we're currently in. The crew quarters above us, the control center where we are, and the main level below us. And the crew quarters is really the only place you're allowed to be by yourself. Only time you're allowed to be up there by yourself is if you're on break. Each crew member will get a maximum of 4 hours, which take a break during the 24-hour work. And during that time, if you want to be up there taking a nap, getting a bite to eat, using the restroom, just having some time for yourself, or in the late 70s, early 80s, and you wanted to play a video game, you could play Pong. Otherwise, you have to put at least one other person at all times. And if you're in this room here, one of those people needs to be an officer. So, we know what they're doing down here. They're monitoring the missile, receiving decoding messages, filing reports. But who was that was down here doing these things? Well, we have 4 members to each crew. 2 officers, you 2 will be running the services up today. And who is the personnel? Our 2 officers are our missile combat crew commanders, which will be you. You're responsible for this main launch desk here. You're also responsible for everyone else stationed below you on your ship. So if they mess up, you're going to be on the hook for it. So you better make sure they don't mess up. Then we have our deputy missile combat crew commander. You're training to get his job. And you're responsible for all those panels you see behind you there. All these panels in front of you here. That's clock. You're also responsible for keeping track of anyone who comes down here who's not part of our 4-person crew. So if we have a maintenance crew down here or an inspection from the higher ups, he would need to keep track exactly where they were at all times. And you would do that in this locator board here. So we know who our officers are. We know what they're responsible for. But what about our 2 enlisted personnel? Well, the first of those are Missile Facilities Technician, or MFT. And they're responsible for the facilities here. So all the stuff on the main level below us, all the plumbing, the electrical, the pneumatics, the generators, all that, they're in charge of making sure all of that's functioning properly. And everything as a result is also functioning properly. They're a little bit like a super in an apartment building. If something's broken, they need to be able to fix it or get someone else down here to fix it. And they're going to be monitoring all of that from just this one set of panels right here. And then our last member of our crew is our Ballistic Missile Analyst Technician, or our BMAT. And they're responsible for all the panels we see behind me here and for our guidance system there. So we know who's down here. We know what they're doing. And when your comment says what they were doing, is they were receiving and decoding thousands and thousands of messages throughout the day. Well, any one of those messages, at any time, could have been the real deal. And for our purposes today, it is. So, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are aware of the Soviet Union. That country United States had all those years of peace and deterrence happening with. Well, in this scenario here, the Soviet Union has decided that peace and deterrence is just not for them. There's too much work involved, too much pressure. So to get it all over with, they're going to launch a missile our way. This missile is going to take about 30 minutes to get here. Luckily for us, we have a pretty good detection system, so we know it's heading our way fairly early on. Now we have that missile out there. Are we allowed to launch it? No, you're right,
Nope.
we're not. We don't have that kind of authority. Even if we thought we knew a missile was heading our way, we can't launch that missile unless we have permission first. And it's really only one person in the United States who would have the authority to authorize nuclear missile strikes. Does anyone know who that would be?
President.
That's right, the president. So the president needs to be informed, and he is. They say, Mr. President, we're under attack. Peace and deterrence have failed. So we now must enact mutually assured destruction. So what the president's going to do is the president's going to go to the nuclear football. It's supposed to be with him at all times. He's going to remove the codes from that football. He's going to send those codes off to the Pentagon. From the Pentagon, they're going to be confirmed. Make sure the proper codes, make sure there's actually an attack happening, it's not a false alarm. After all, no one wants to start World War III if they don't have to. Now, from the Pentagon, they're going to be sent off to Strategic Air Command out of Omaha, Nebraska. And from Strategic Air Command, they're sent to 3 places. The bomber groups, here protecting the silos, and the submarines. Now, all in all, for that message to get from the president all the way down to us here, it's going to take about 20 to 25 minutes. Now, you recall I said we have 30 minutes for that missile gets here, correct? So we have 5, maybe 10 minutes left if we're lucky. But that's okay. Because you see, the Titan II, unlike its predecessors, the Titan I and the Atlas, can launch in just 58 seconds. So as long as you 2 and the rest of your crew are on the top of your game, you have no problems here. So no pressure. Now, when that message does come down the line, it's going to sound something a little bit like this. You're going to be dropping everything you're doing. You're both running and grabbing one of these. You're going to open it up. You're going to write down what you heard. When the message repeats, you're going to switch it, your books, and you're going to write it down again. And then you're going to check. Is what he wrote the same as what you wrote? And you're going to check. Is what he wrote the same as what you wrote? And you're going to put them both together. They both match. You're going to decode it. You're going to head over to that red safe there. That red safe is our emergency war order safe. You see the two locks in that safe? Those two locks would belong to the commander and deputy commander of each of them respectively. They would have been switched off to the top and bottom wherever you look. You are the only two people down here who know the combination of those locks. That's because the combination of those locks are on a strictly need-to-know basis. And you're the only two people down here who need to know. So you take the locks off the safe, and you take out two items from the safe. First item you're taking out is one of these. This here is an order authenticator card. How you choose which of these you're going to need is by taking the first two characters on message there and match them to the two characters on this card here. So say that those two characters are going to Echo Hotel. You're taking this card here, you're going to crack it open, and you're going to flip this red card here. This red card is called the cookie, and it's very important. Do you see this line of code here on this cookie? This line of code needs to match the first line of code in that message. If this line of code isn't matched, this message is not real. It's not from the president. But because we know this is a real launch order, this line of code will match, and we know that our orders are authentic. And the second thing you're pulling out of there is a set of keys. Now some of you, when you came in here, may have seen the big glowing red buttons on the desk, and you may have thought to yourself, well, I have seen that movie, or I have seen that TV show. I know how this works. When we launch the missile, we're pressing the big red buttons, right? I don't know. Like many things in the movies on TV, that's not how it works in real life. How it works in real life is that we turn keys. That's what those keys mean. So one half is the keys here, and your half is right there. Now looking at those two keys, you'll notice they're pretty far apart from each other. In fact, you had to stretch to really see that one, didn't you? And that's on purpose. That's because you need at least two people down here to launch this missile. No one person's going to be able to reach those keys at the same time to turn them at the same time. And they do need to be turned at the exact same time for this missile to launch. So we have our keys to launch the missile. We have our orders telling us we will launch the missile. But we're not ready to launch the missile just yet. We still need two more items. And both of these items are going to be in that message receipt earlier. The first item we're going to need is our launch time. So you as our deputy commander, you take the launch time of this message. You come to the clock, you take the grease, and you write the launch time on that clock. Now looking at the clock there, you'll notice it's a little different than your average clock. For one thing, it's 24 hours, not 12. And even though that one up there is also 24 hours, they don't match. And if you work that back to 12, it's not going to match my watch, it's probably not going to match any of your phones. That's because that clock there is in Zulu time.
New
and
Greenwich.
Zulu time is what the military refers to Greenwich Mean Time as, and Greenwich Mean Time is the time zone that all time zones around the world are based from. That's not going to be affected by AM or PM. It's not going to be affected by daylight savings, and it's not going to be affected by the time zone you're in. It's the same no matter where you are. So we know when we're supposed to launch the missile. We have our orders to launch the missile, and the keys to launch the missile. But you recall I did say we still need one more item before we can launch the missile. In this last item, we don't have it. It doesn't matter for all the other three. They're not launching that missile out there. That's because this last item is the last major fail-safe, keeping them from launching the missile when they're not supposed to. And the only way you're going to have this item is if this is a real launch order. This is a real launch order, you have the item. And this item is a butterfly valve control lock code. Now looking at that code there, you may be wondering how that code could keep you from launching the missile. Well, without that code, you would not be able to remove the pin that keeps this butterfly valve locked. This is half of a butterfly valve. And normally it's kept locked in place by a pin. The only way for this pin to be removed is to have that code. So the code gets it in, the pin gets removed, and the valve can now open. Now the reason this valve is so important and there needs to be a lock on it is because of the fuel. You see the fuel in that missile out there is hypergolic, which means there's an oxidizer and there's a fuel. And when they come together, they combine violently, which is how the missile out there launches. So as you can imagine, you don't want anybody being able those fuels to come together. And that's where that code comes in. Now looking at the code, you may think, well, it's only 6 characters, how hard can it be? Give me enough time, I should probably guess that. Well, each of those dials up there has 16 characters on each dial. And you only get 6 tries. So if you can't guess that in 6 tries, this will cease to function. And the only way to launch that missile out there is to get this completely replaced. And at that point, launching the missile is the least of your worries, because you're going to be in for pretty big trouble, because you're not supposed to mess with that in the first place. So it's a pretty good fail-safe. Now, since we have the code, you would tell our beamer what the code is. The beamer would come up here, enter the code, hit the test button. If it's green, we're good to go. Now, there's going to be a loud siren at some point in the next few seconds. So there's... Alright, so once you've done that, you both have your left hand to the keys. Then you have to do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, at which point you would turn the keys at the same time to your clock and hold for 5 seconds. Once that's done, our launch sequence starts. How our launch sequence starts, we know our launch sequence starts, so these lights here will light up. The first light is going to come on as our launch enable light. This means we have a good code. The second light is our batteries activated light. This lets us know that batteries are on our missile out there, which there's 2 of them. They're being forced by electrolytes for the first time, supercharging them. It takes about 28 seconds to finish. Once that's done, that missile will be completely independent of the silo when it comes to its power. Then comes our APS power light. This lets us know the batteries are fully charged. It also lets us know that there's 9,000 gallons of water being poured onto the bomb silo per minute. Then comes silo soft. This means the silo doors are open and the missile is being prepared to launch. Then guidance go. This means the guidance system here is communicating with the missile for the last time, seeing where it is and where it's going. In this case, we're set to target 2. If we have to do an order, we're going to switch from target 2 to target 1, or target 2 to target 3, or from a ground burst to an air burst. But we're set to target 2 with a ground burst. Now, back in the day, they were also set to target 2. Back then, they had no clue where target 2 was. They knew where target 1 was, or target 3. That's because all of those targets were classified, and they're still classified to this day. We still have no idea where those targets are. All we know is target 2 and a ground burst. It's about 15, 16 seconds to complete, at which point fire engines is the next light that comes on. That means the fuels are coming together. There's a fire in the silo. The engines are on, it's launching. Which leads to our last light, which is liftoff. The missile's gone. So now that we know what's going to happen, we're going to do it for real. So if you both put in line, put your left hands on the keys. Before you do your countdown, I'm going to ask you to do something for me, okay? Once these keys have been turned, these lights will come on in the sequence I just described. When they do, if you breathe them out loud for us, that'd be great. And just the top line, other lights will come on, ignore them, just read off the launch table plus down. So when you're ready, Commander, you may count down to this missile launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Launch enabled.
You can let go now.
Batteries activated.
So launch enabled, we have a good code. Batteries activated. Those two 28-volt dry batteries in the missile are being forced by electrolytes for the first time, supercharging them. Once that's done, this missile will be completely independent of the silo when it comes to its power. It takes 28 seconds. This 28 seconds is probably going to feel the longest 28 seconds you've ever experienced in your life. But it is only 28 seconds, we've counted them. So keep an eye out, next light will be coming on soon, but it'll take a little bit. As you can see.
APS power.
APS power, batteries fully charged, 9,000 gallons of water, being battle that silo per minute.
Silo soft.
Silo soft, silo there's no triple fixings.
Guidance go.
Guidance go, the guidance system here is communicating with the missile for the last time, seeing where it is and where it's going. In this case, remember, we are set to target 2. If we have been given orders, we're going to switch from target 2 to target 1, or target 2 to target 3, or from ground burst to an air burst, or target 2 to ground burst.
Fire engine. Lift off.
Lift off. Launch your missile. How do you feel?
Like a champ.
How do you feel?
Pretty good.
All right. Now, since you have just launched your missile, what do you think you're going to be doing?
Report.
No, you don't have to worry about reports. I can tell you what you can do if you want. You have some orders to fulfill. Those orders are to sit here and wait for more orders. Now, like I said, you have just launched your only weapon that matters in this fight. There's another missile heading our way. If we're lucky, it lands at least a mile away, but it is going to land in the next couple minutes or so. And there's a nuclear war happening outside. Do you think the chances are very high you're going to get more orders anytime soon?
No.
Probably not. But you might. Which is why the military started them, their entire crew, with an entire month of food and water. Now, they're not going to need that entire month, however. Because you see, when you launched that missile up there, what you also did was you cut your fresh air supply off. So you only got 3 weeks of air left. But that's okay. Because you see the level below us, besides all the electrical, the pneumatics, the generators, the plumbing, all of that, there's also an escape hatch. So at the end of those 3 weeks, if they haven't received any more orders, what they could do, one of their options, is to go down to the level below us, up the escape hatch, at which point they would have orders to move to the location of the mountains nearby, and continue the survivors to the silos around Tucson. So you know, not all bad. Compared to most, they have a pretty good chance of surviving that initial impact. You get an entire month of food and water, which you only need 3 weeks of. You get food afterwards to the fallout, and you can go afterwards. So, you know, it's not too bad. Lucky though for you, and for the rest of us, and for the people who were down there, we didn't need to worry about that because it never actually happened. We never had a missile launch events. We never launched a missile anyone else. We never called upon to enact mutually assured destruction because so far, peace of the terms work, and we're all still here. Now, we are running a little bit short on time, so if you have any questions you're going to ask, you hold them until we're done in the silo. We're going to head down the cableway now to the silo. On your way down there, you're going to see some suits hanging in the cableway. These suits are a little bit like desert camo spacesuits. Well, they're not spacesuits and they're not desert camo. What they are refueling suits. You recall that there are two parts of the fuel in that missile? Well, the oxidizer especially was very volatile. You wouldn't want it getting on your skin or your lungs, or some pretty bad things would happen. So to ensure it did not happen, those suits needed to be airtight. To ensure they remained airtight, they would test them from time to time. If they ever did find a leak, they would patch them. So all the dark patches you can see on those suits out there, those aren't a fashion design, it's not a fashion statement, it's not desert camo, they're repair patches. So if you head down the cableway, you'll see the suits. If you keep going, you'll get to the silo. Now, would either of you two, like a souvenir, let you know you helped enact World War III?
Sure.
Okay, that's what she was talking about. Jesus.
But because it's pretty sure a missile was a training missile, which was received from Air Force Base, but was not followed by and such never had a warhead or refuel it, it only weighed 15,000 pounds. 141 of these missiles were made. 32 were used for research development. 49 were used for training, like this one was made. And 54 were still worked in various silos throughout the country. Now, when this missile was being developed, NASA actually got a look at the plans for the rocket on it. Like enough, they had some custom made for themselves. And these rockets were used on various programs throughout the years, including the Gemini program. You know anything about Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon? You might know he took his first trip to space with the Gemini program. So he went to space for the first time with a modified Titan II rocket helping him. The Titan II was also used on the Voyager program, which if you listen to the news last few years, you might know recently it's way to for Earth. And they were using a couple of the Mars missions as well, the Mariner missions. Now, when you look out into the silo along the walls, you should be able to see what looks like gray box-like structures. And what those are is those are filled with spun fiberglass. And the purpose of that spun fiberglass is very similar to the purpose of the water that's poured down from the silo during launch. And that is, keep this missile from shaking apart when it launches. When this missile launches, it has 430,000 pounds of thrust behind it, which is the equivalent of 2 747 jets taking off at the same time at full throttle in what is a relatively small and enclosed space. So as you can imagine, if there wasn't something there to dampen the vibrations, this missile would shake apart. Just with the fiberglass and the water coming. The fiberglass like the sound dampers, if we have a sound video, that's the vibrations that way. And the way the water works is that when the exhaust of the engine hits the water, it creates steam. And the process of the steam being created is actually helps to dampen the vibrations, so while the missile launch doesn't take apart. Now, in 1987, when all of these silos were fully decommissioned, 14 of these missiles were taken and they were refurbished. And from 1988 to 2003, they were used to launch communications and weather satellites up into orbit. So the official end of the Titan II's lifespan was in 2003, which gives it about a 40-year lifespan, which is pretty impressive if you consider the fact that Titan II was only ever meant to last 10 years. But in the 70s, with the Cold War heating up, it was still another 10 to 14, so about 20 to 24 years as a missile, and another 16 or so as a tool for communication. So overall, not a bad useful lifespan for something like this. Now, do any of you have any questions?
I have a question. Is there a certain height that you have to be to work here?
I know about maximum.
Maximum.
I know that the military in general did have a maximum height limit. I'm not aware of a specific maximum height limit right here. They would have been very more than general units, but they probably would have had
Right. Okay.
Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, we're going to head back up topside and finish the rest of the tour. If you like the view of the missile from here, you're going to love the view of the missile from up topside. You have a view of the top from up topside that is considered the best view of this missile that we have. So we're going to head back up, we're going to finish the tour, and once we're over the tour, you can walk around again and see the missile from the viewing platform. If you follow me, we'll head back up, we'll finish the tour up there.
I think that's, how do you, that's an, so it looks like me.
Oh, I found out I have phone service there.
So walking the mile, green mile.
I'm up there. Platform up. Ready? Alright, we're back topside. If you look over there, it's very, very obvious air conditioner. That's where the escape hatch and the air intake would have been. Now around that, you'll see what looks like silvery gray scoop-like structures. And if you look at the style doors, you should be able to see some more of them. And what those are the tipsies. You recall the alarm that went off down below, which simulated the missile launch? That would have been the solid doors opening and tripping the tipsy's invisible perimeter. The tipsies work in a Doppler system. They create an invisible perimeter on both the air intake and the silo doors. You'll recall there's only the one camera here, and that's down below. As a result, these tipsies and that gate there were the main security system here. So the tipsies work in a Doppler system, and when the perimeter is breached, the alarm like alert goes off. Security police are called. They show up again, the vehicle like that one behind me there, and they investigate. Now, in all the years of this place being active as a missile site, they never had any two-legged intruders. Only the four-legged and furry and the two-embedded varieties. Now, looking at the silo door, you'll notice that it is half open. They see it remotely, holding on these rather large blocks behind it. And the other half of the silo is a big dome over it. When you go up to the viewing platform, look down into that dome, which I do suggest to you if you haven't already, since it really is the best view we have of the missile. You should be able to see on the left side of the nose cone a fairly prominent and square hole. And that hole, and that dome, and those large blocks there are all there so that we can be in compliance with the SALT Treaty. The SALT Treaty is the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, which the United States signed with the Soviet Union. And as part of that treaty, all the Titan IIs had to be deactivated. And as part of that deactivation process, they had to have their equipment stripped, their missiles removed, their silos blown up, left open for a time so that Soviet satellites could fly overhead, look down so they're not active anymore. At which point, the missile silo was filled in with debris, covered over with large cement capstones, buried, and the land sold off. Now, quite obviously, it did not happen here. And that's because part of that treaty, there was a stipulation put in place that we could be open as a museum so long as we had these compliances. So because these compliances mirror the effects of the deactivation process, we were allowed to be open as a museum in the first place. Now, we are indeed in the guided tour. The rest of the tour is self-guided. I do suggest if you haven't already going up to the viewing platform, look down and look at the missile. Behind the viewing platform, we have some of the engines to the missile, and there are various signs throughout that give you more information. If you have any questions after that, please either I or my associate will have any answer questions. Otherwise, before I go, I first off thank you all for joining me, and also leave you with this last thought. And that is that we never had to deal with what we simulated down below. We never had a missile launch announced. We never launched a missile to anyone else. We were never called upon to enact these research instructions because so far peace and deterrence work. And we're all still here. So again, thank you all for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your tour and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. That's a big old bell.
Yep. In Huntsville, Alabama, they've got the moon rocket.
Oh, really?
It's each one of 5 is from here to the peak there, and the whole circumference is
Good lord.
just